GLP-1s aren't the real breakthrough. Mitochondrial peptides are. If you're new to my channel, welcome. My name is Steve Jones. I'm a medical doctor specializing in longevity medicine here in Texas, and I help add life to your years. And today we're going to talk about something that sits really at the very center of performance, recovery, fat loss, cognitive clarity, and even aging itself. Your mitochondria. More specifically, we're going to break down the mitochondrial peptides that are getting the attention right now. You've heard of these: MOTS, SS31, Humanin, KPV, and yes, even the GLP-1 class. So if you're a high-performing man or woman who's 40 and over, who feels like your energy just isn't what it used to be, your recovery is slower, your body composition is getting harder to control, and brain fog just keeps creeping in more than you feel like it should, this conversation is for you. Now, as always, my disclaimer, this is educational content only. Many of these peptides are not FDA approved, especially for anti-aging or performance purposes. You need proper medical supervision, make sure you're getting high quality sourcing, and make sure that your foundational health is in place before even considering using these tools. Okay, let's zoom out a little bit first and let's look at why mitochondria matter more than you might think. Your mitochondria are the power plants inside your cells. They convert nutrients to ATP, which is usable energy. But they don't just make energy. They also regulate things like your metabolic efficiency. They regulate inflammation, apoptosis, which is cellular cleanup. They regulate insulin sensitivity, the reactive oxygen species that are inside of them, and even to a degree, some gene expression itself. And as you can imagine, as we age, especially under chronic stress, sleep deprivation, overtraining, processed foods, alcohol, environmental toxins, mitochondrial function declines. So you don't just feel older, your cellular energy production is literally less efficient. Now that is where the mitochondrial peptides can step in and help. But remember something important, and I say this often at Revive: peptides are merely amplifiers. They do not substitute for sleep, hormone optimization, resistance training, or your metabolic health. If your testosterone, estradiol, thyroid, sleep, insulin, or any of that stuff are a mess, there is no peptide stack that's going to save you. All right, I want to break down today the specific ones, and let's start with MOTS. I think of this as the metabolic optimizer. MOTS is fascinating to me because it is actually encoded within mitochondrial DNA itself. We often refer to it as an exercise mimetic peptide. We'll get to that in a minute. The way MOTS works is that it activates AMPK, which is the longevity pathway in our body. It also improves insulin sensitivity. It can enhance glucose utilization. It promotes metabolic flexibility, and it, in some studies, may even improve mitochondrial biogenesis. That's the making of new mitochondria themselves. All right, so clinically, like in real life, what does that really mean to us? In the right patient, you may see things like improved fat loss, better glucose control, enhanced endurance, and more stable energy. So for my typical client at Revive, I'm usually working with driven professionals that are 40s, 50s, and 60s. This is powerful, especially for the person who says things like, "Doc, I'm training harder than I used to, but my body isn't responding the same." Now, MOTS can help that person, but it's not magic. If they are sedentary, poorly nourished, inflamed, sleeping 5 hours a night, it's not going to override that. But in someone who's already doing the right things, it can enhance the metabolic signal. All right, peptide number 2, SS31. This is the mitochondrial protector. SS31 is also called elamipretide. It's a mouthful in research settings, and it works differently than any other peptide out there. It targets cardiolipin. That is a unique little lipid that's in the inner mitochondrial membrane. When cardiolipin becomes oxidized, mitochondrial efficiency drops and reactive oxygen species increase. So SS31 helps to stabilize that mitochondrial membrane. Therefore, it reduces oxidative stress. It also can improve ATP production efficiency, and potentially it can even support cardiac and skeletal muscle function, and that's impressive. In practical terms, this is a recovery peptide. I'm using it currently myself as part of a 12-week winter peptide cycle to get my body recovered after a busy year and to get ready for the spring that's coming. I've seen this used in people that are high-performing executives that are under chronic stress, athletes that are really pushing volume, patients with fatigue syndromes, and really anybody that's looking to protect their cardiac resilience. It's not a stimulant. This is not something that you're going to feel immediately like a shot of caffeine or a big pre-workout can. It works quietly. It's improving efficiency at the cellular level. And for longevity, that's compelling, and that's why I'm using it. All right, the third peptide I want to talk about is called Humanin, and this is like the cellular survival signal. Humanin is another mitochondrial-derived peptide. It's being studied for things like neuroprotection, protection against metabolic stress, and a whole host of anti-inflammatory pathways. Lower levels of this particular peptide have been associated with neurodegenerative processes, insulin resistance, and cardiovascular disease. Now, I want to be really clear, we're not claiming that any disease can be treated here, but conceptually, Humanin appears to be part of the body's internal cell survival system. In the longevity conversation, this becomes interesting, especially for cognitive longevity, metabolic resilience. This can be helpful in high-stress individuals. At Revive, we often talk about restoring your edge. We're not talking only about testosterone, right? We're also talking about cellular resilience, and Humanin fits into that philosophy. The fourth one is another new one kind of to my toolbox. It's called KPV, and this is a major inflammation modulator. KPV is primarily known for those anti-inflammatory properties. So why do I include it into the mitochondrial discussion? Is because chronic inflammation does a big time number on mitochondria. So KPV works by reducing pro-inflammatory cytokines. It supports gut barrier function. We know that's a whole growing area of research in and of itself. And then it modulates immune signaling. So many driven health professionals, 50-year-olds out there, we're inflamed, aren't we? Not visibly, but metabolically. And it comes out with poor sleep. It happens because of alcohol, processed foods, stress, and then that hidden gut dysfunction. Mitochondria do not thrive in inflammatory environments. KPV helps to lower the noise. And sometimes before we optimize energy production, we have to reduce the inflammation. That's foundational, and that's why I think KPV belongs in this discussion. So now let's talk about the GLP-1 class. Yes, this includes medications like semaglutide, tirzepatide, and retatrutide. These GLP-1s are approved for things like diabetes and obesity, but mechanistically GLP-1 receptor agonists do important things like improve insulin sensitivity, slow gastric emptying, reduce your appetite, improve glycemic control, and reduce visceral fat. So why is that relevant to mitochondria? Because mitochondria dysfunction is tightly linked to insulin resistance, visceral adiposity, and chronic hyperglycemia. So when we reduce visceral fat and we improve insulin sensitivity, we reduce mitochondrial stress. Indirectly, GLP-1 therapy can improve metabolic efficiency, reduce inflammatory burden, improve energy signaling. Now, one thing to point out, this is critical, GLP-1s are tools. They are not shortcuts. If someone loses weight but does not strength train, does not maintain adequate protein intake, doesn't optimize their hormones, they risk muscle loss and metabolic slowdown because of that. So in our clinic, we use GLP-1 strategically, not reactively and not just for weight loss. All right, the bigger picture that we need to kind of pull back and look at with all of these is stacking these things with a strategy. And that's really what separates longevity medicine from trendy medicine and biohacking. We don't need to chase peptides. We need to build a system. At Revive, our framework is to discover what's going on with our clients, optimize. Typically that starts with metabolic and hormonal health, and then perform. That's where things like peptides really kick in. With the Discover, we've got to check your labs and your hormones. We have to start to dial in insulin resistance, look at your body composition, your levels of inflammation. When we optimize your testosterone or estrogen balance, you start to feel better. We need to check your thyroid and get it dialed in, and then we have to lean into sleep, nutrition, and resistance training. And then when we're performing, we use things like advanced peptides. We want to do mitochondrial optimization. We may have a GLP-1 strategy with some NAD support, and we want some wearable data tracking. Mitochondrial peptides work best in optimized terrain. So if the terrain is toxic, they're going to underperform. Let's talk about some risk and a little bit of reality about these peptides. Most of the ones we've talked about today outside of the GLP-1s are not FDA approved. And for anti-aging, none of them are. They're often compounded. In my opinion, they require physician oversight and they require quality sourcing. Side effects can vary based on the agent. The most common things that we are going to see are injection site reactions, some GI effects, especially with the GLP-1s, nausea, maybe some constipation. I even see a case of diarrhea from the GLP-1s from time to time. There may be some potential long-term data that surprises us later. It just seems unlikely, being that there's such a small molecule, just a few amino acids, and we're already making them in our body. And I also want to point out that quality matters and dosing matters. And maybe most important, patient selection matters. I think patient expectations matter as well. There's no single peptide, and listen to this, that's going to, quote, turn back the clock. But improving your mitochondrial function, that might be one of the most intelligent longevity plays that's available today. All right, so who's this for? This conversation really is for the 45-year-old executive who's training but feels flat, the woman in her mid-50s who eats clean but just can't get rid of that little extra pudge around the midsection, the high-output entrepreneur who's go, go, go but feels cognitively slower than 5 years ago. Maybe it's for the disciplined athlete whose recovery window is starting to widen. If you want to restore your edge, don't just optimize hormones. That's the right place to start, but you need to optimize your cellular energy. And just a final takeaway here, mitochondrial decline is one of the central drivers of aging. MOTS improves metabolic signaling. SS31 protects mitochondrial membranes. Humanin supports cellular survival. KPV reduces inflammatory burden, and GLP-1s improve the metabolic environment that mitochondria live in. These are different angles for the same target. We're looking at cellular energy. And if you can improve cellular energy, you improve performance, you improve resilience, recovery, and longevity. And that's the game. Hey, if this content was helpful, please share it with somebody who needs it. And if you're serious about optimizing your biology instead of guessing and biohacking your way through different, influencers on the internet, please reach out to us at Revive. We would love to help you.